Nathan Carter had seen his fair share of battles, but he never expected his toughest fight to be over porch lights. After 20 years in the military, he had finally earned his peace. A quiet home in an upscale suburban neighborhood where he could relax, grill in his backyard, and enjoy a well-deserved retirement. His house wasn't just a house. It was his sanctuary, a place he had bought with his own blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The two-story colonial-style home sat on a pristine corner lot, complete with a manicured lawn, an American flag proudly waving from the porch, and a workshop-style garage where he restored classic motorcycles as a hobby. The house was a symbol of everything he had worked for, a piece of the American dream. But that dream came with a price, the HOA. It had started with small, petty notices. A warning about the color of his mailbox. A reminder that his grass was 0.2 inches taller than the approved length. Then came the absurd fines, a $150 charge for having unauthorized exterior decorations. His holiday lights were still up 2 days past the HOA deadline, and a $250 penalty for parking his truck in his own driveway instead of inside the garage. And then there was Karen. Karen Wellington, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, had ruled the HOA with an iron fist for the past 6 years. A woman in her late 50s, always dressed in business casual attire despite not having a job, Karen spent her days patrolling the streets, clipboard in hand, issuing warnings like a dictator of a miniature empire. If there was a rule to enforce, she'd find a way to wield it as a weapon. And Nathan was her newest target. The final straw came on a sunny Saturday morning. Nathan had been working in his garage, making minor repairs to his fence, when a sharp voice cut through the peaceful suburban air. "Nathan, we need to talk." He looked up to see Karen standing at the edge of his driveway, arms crossed, her eyes scanning his property like a predator sizing up its prey. Nathan wiped his hands on a rag, barely concealing his irritation. "What now, Karen?" She clicked her pen against her clipboard. "You've been warned about making unapproved modifications to your property. That fence. You didn't submit a request for repairs. That's a violation of HOA regulations." Nathan narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me I need permission to fix a broken fence board?" Karen smirked, as if she had just checkmated him. "Rules are rules, Nathan. And if you don't comply, you'll be fined." Nathan folded his arms, stepping closer. "Let me get this straight. I served my country for 20 years. I fought for freedom. And now, you're telling me I need your approval to maintain my own property." Karen pursed her lips. "We have guidelines for a reason. If we let one homeowner bend the rules, it creates chaos. I'm sure you understand discipline, given your background." Nathan exhaled sharply through his nose. "Discipline and control are two different things, Karen. And I don't take orders from clipboard warriors." Karen's eyes darkened. "Then expect a formal violation notice. And a fine. A big one." Nathan chuckled dryly. "Go ahead. Send all the paperwork you want. But I'll warn you now, I don't back down from a fight." Karen's expression remained neutral, but he could see the flicker of challenge in her eyes. "We'll see about that, Mr. Carter." As she turned and walked away, Nathan knew one thing for certain. This was war. HOA's first power move. Nathan wasn't surprised when the violation notice arrived just 2 days later. What did surprise him was the sheer audacity of it. A bright red envelope was taped to his front door, stamped with urgent notice in bold capital letters. Inside, a detailed letter outlined his supposed violations. Unauthorized exterior modifications, $750 fine. Failure to comply with HOA landscaping guidelines, $300 fine. Repeated noncompliance with HOA regulations, subject to legal action. Nathan read the list twice and shook his head. Landscaping guidelines? His lawn was pristine. Unauthorized exterior modifications? That fence repair was a necessity. And the threat of legal action? Now Karen was just flexing her imaginary power. As he stood on his porch, rereading the letter, he spotted movement across the street. Karen. Watching. Smiling. Nathan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain calm. He didn't need to engage her. He needed to outthink her. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through county property codes. Sure enough, nothing in local law required homeowners to seek permission for minor repairs. In fact, HOA regulations couldn't override municipal laws. He had her. With a smirk, Nathan grabbed his keys and drove straight to the HOA office. The small, overly decorated office smelled like printer toner and bad decisions. Karen sat behind the front desk, pretending to be busy with paperwork. Ah, Nathan, she said, not even looking up. I assume you're here to settle your fines? Nathan dropped the letter on her desk. Actually, I'm here to challenge them. Karen sighed dramatically. Nathan, the HOA operates under strict guidelines. If you— No, Karen, he interrupted, tapping the page. I check city codes. HOAs can't override municipal property laws. The county allows minor property repairs without permits. So tell me, why am I being fined? For the first time, Karen hesitated. Just for a second. Then she plastered on a sickly sweet smile. Nathan, we have additional HOA policies to keep the neighborhood looking presentable. He leaned forward, voice steady. And those policies don't hold up against state law. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop these fines, or I'll be filing a formal complaint with the city. Karen's eyes flashed with something between irritation and amusement. You're quite persistent, she said. But that won't be necessary. Consider the fines reviewed. Nathan studied her carefully. She was backing down too easily. Reviewed, he repeated. She nodded. Yes. We'll discuss them at the next HOA board meeting. You're welcome to attend. Nathan wasn't stupid. This wasn't a surrender. It was a trap. Fine, he said, grabbing the letter. I'll be there. He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, Karen's voice followed him. Oh, and Nathan? He paused, looking over his shoulder. You really should read the HOA bylaws more carefully. They're quite extensive. Nathan walked out, knowing damn well she wasn't done with him. That evening, he was working in his garage when the real attack came. A loud knock rattled his front door. When he opened it, he found 2 city inspectors standing on his porch. Mr. Carter? One of them asked, holding up a clipboard. We received a report about multiple property violations. Nathan's jaw clenched. Let me guess, Karen? The inspector sighed. We're required to check, sir. Nathan stepped aside, letting them in. He knew his property was perfectly legal. And sure enough, after a thorough walkthrough, the inspectors found nothing. We'll file a report clearing you, one of them said. But between us, this HOA seems excessive. Nathan exhaled, rubbing his temple. Tell me about it. As the inspectors left, he turned toward Karen's house. She was on her porch, sipping tea, watching. She smirked. He smirked back. All right, Karen. You want to fight? You got one. The HOA escalates the conflict. Nathan wasn't one to start fights, but he never backed down from one either. And now Karen had made it personal. The next morning, another bright red urgent notice was taped to his door. This one claimed, unapproved vehicle storage, $1,000 fine. Failure to comply with HOA parking regulations, possible legal action. Ongoing noncompliance, subject to HOA property lien. Nathan laughed out loud. A lien? On his house? Over a truck? He glanced at his driveway. His vintage 1969 Chevy C10, which he had always parked there, was still sitting perfectly legal on his own property. The truck had been his first restoration project after retiring. He had rebuilt the engine, repainted the body, and replaced every bolt by hand. And now Karen was calling it an unapproved vehicle? No, this wasn't about rules anymore. This was about control. Nathan grabbed the letter and stormed straight to the HOA office. Karen was waiting for him. Ah, Nathan, she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. Back so soon? Nathan tossed the notice onto her desk. You're really reaching now, Karen. She sighed dramatically. Nathan, I don't make the rules. I simply enforce them. Since when is a truck illegal? He demanded. Karen tapped her pen against her clipboard. The HOA regulations state that non-standard vehicles must be stored out of sight. Nathan's eyes narrowed. It's a truck, Karen, not an abandoned RV. She smiled thinly. Our board recently voted to classify older vehicles as visual disturbances. Nathan almost laughed again. Of course, she had changed the rules just to target him. File an appeal if you'd like, Karen continued smugly. But if you don't comply, the HOA has the right to take action, including placing a lien on your property. Nathan clenched his fists. A lien? This woman was out of her mind. That's when an idea hit him. Nathan leaned forward. You know, Karen, I've been doing some research, and I noticed something interesting about your little operation. Karen's fake smile faltered just a little. Nathan pulled out his phone and scrolled through his notes. Turns out, HOA fines are supposed to go into a community maintenance fund. But when I checked last year's budget report, I noticed something strange. Almost $20,000 in fines, but less than $5,000 allocated to maintenance. Karen's face paled slightly. Oh, and here's another fun fact, Nathan continued. Turns out, a few homeowners had their fines disappear after making, let's call them donations to the HOA discretionary fund. Silence. Nathan grinned. Sound familiar, Karen? She recovered quickly, straightening her posture. If you have concerns, you're welcome to bring them up at the next HOA meeting. Oh, I will, Nathan said. And I think the county fraud department might be interested, too. For the first time since their battle began, Karen looked nervous. Nathan smirked. See you at the meeting, Karen. He turned and walked out, leaving her gripping her clipboard a little too tightly. That evening, Nathan took a deeper dive into the HOA's finances. Using his contacts from his military days, he pulled public records, budget reports, and legal filings. What he found? A mess. Karen had been running the HOA like a personal kingdom. Mysterious consulting fees paid to companies that didn't exist. Inflated fines that never made it into official budgets. Selective enforcement. Homeowners she liked never got violations. She wasn't just power-hungry. She was corrupt. The next day, Nathan met with a few HOA board members, the ones who weren't under Karen's thumb. They had suspicions for months, but were too afraid to speak up. Not anymore. Nathan laid out everything he had found. When he finished, one of the board members shook his head. This is bad. Another side. We knew Karen was controlling, but if this gets out... Oh, it's going to get out, Nathan promised. At the next meeting, we're exposing her. The board members exchanged nervous glances, then nodded. Nathan left the meeting knowing one thing. Karen's little empire was about to crumble. That night, his security camera caught Karen sneaking onto his property. She walked up his driveway, clipboard in hand, inspecting his garage, his truck, even his porch. She was looking for something, some reason to hit him with another fine. Nathan smiled. The next HOA meeting was going to be fun. The HOA oversteps and the protagonist strikes back. Nathan woke up the next morning to the sound of machinery. The low rumble of an engine, the scrape of metal against pavement. Something was wrong. He grabbed his phone and checked the security feed. His truck was being towed. Nathan bolted outside, heart pounding. A tow truck was hooked to his Chevy, its front wheels already lifted off the ground. And standing there, smug as ever, was Karen. Stop right there, Nathan shouted as he stormed down the driveway. Karen crossed her arms. Your vehicle is in violation of HOA regulations. It's being impounded. Nathan laughed, actually laughed. On whose authority? Karen's smirk widened. The HOA's. Nathan turned to the tow truck driver. You have a city order for this? The driver hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. I just got a call from the HOA. Nathan's anger sharpened into something cold and calculated. That's funny, because under state law, a homeowners association doesn't have the right to remove personal property from private land. The driver paled. Wait, what? Nathan pulled out his phone. I'll make this easy. You unhook my truck right now, or I call the sheriff. The driver turned to Karen, who wasn't smirking anymore. Karen started. Nathan cut her off. You really should have read those bylaws more carefully, Karen. The driver dropped the truck immediately, muttering a quick apology before peeling out of the driveway. Nathan took a step closer to Karen. That was theft, Karen. You just broke the law. Karen's face flushed red. I was enforcing HOA policy. HOA policy doesn't override state law. Nathan snapped. You're getting desperate. Karen took a breath, regaining her composure. We'll see about that. Then she spun on her heel and stormed off. Nathan knew she wasn't done. She was about to make a bigger mistake. That evening, Nathan met with the other HOA board members. They were done with Karen. We've had enough, one of them admitted. She's been running this HOA like a dictatorship. We can't keep looking the other way, another agreed. Nathan nodded. Good. Because tomorrow we're taking this public. He had proof of financial corruption. He had security footage of Karen trespassing. And now, he had a towing attempt that could get her legally removed. Tomorrow's HOA meeting was about to be a reckoning. HOA meeting, the showdown. Nathan walked into the packed community center. Karen sat at the head of the table, looking annoyed but confident. She didn't know what was coming. Nathan stood. I'd like to bring a motion to discuss the misuse of HOA funds and illegal enforcement actions. Karen scoffed. Nathan, we're not here for conspiracy theories. Nathan pulled out his phone and pressed play. The security footage appeared on the screen behind him. Karen, on his property, sneaking around, writing fake violations. The room erupted. That's trespassing, someone shouted. She fined me for the same thing, another neighbor added. Then Nathan pulled up the financial reports. Karen, would you like to explain why HOA funds are missing? Karen's face went pale. That information is private. No, it's not, Nathan cut in. HOA funds belong to the homeowners. And when I checked the records, there are tens of thousands of dollars unaccounted for. Murmurs turned into outrage. This is fraud. She's been stealing from us. Karen stood quickly. Enough. This meeting is over. No, one of the board members said. You're over. Karen froze. Another board member stood. Effective immediately, Karen Wellington is removed from the HOA board. The room exploded in applause. Karen spun on Nathan, her face red with rage. You have no idea what you've done. Nathan just smiled. Oh, I think I do. Karen stormed out, shoving past furious homeowners. Nathan exhaled, feeling the first real sense of victory. But he wasn't done yet. Karen had lost her power. But now, it was time to end the HOA itself. Karen's final, desperate move. Nathan knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. She had spent years ruling the HOA with an iron fist. She wasn't about to surrender easily. And sure enough, the next day, she made her final, desperate move. It started with a letter, hand-delivered. No HOA logo, no official header. Just a plain white envelope slipped under his door. Inside, a fake legal notice. Notice of legal action. Plaintiff, Homeowners Association. Defendant, Nathan Carter. Allegation, defamation, harassment, and obstruction of HOA governance. Remedy sought, immediate compliance or legal action. Nathan chuckled. She was bluffing. The document had no attorney's name, no court seal, no case number. Just Karen's pathetic attempt at scaring him into submission. He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo, and sent it to a lawyer friend. Response, that's fraudulent. Reported immediately. Nathan grinned. It was time to bury Karen for good. But Karen wasn't done. That night, his security camera alert went off. Nathan checked the live feed, and his blood boiled. Karen, on his porch. Again. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, and taped it to his door. Nathan stormed outside, catching her red-handed. Karen! She jumped, spinning around. Nathan ripped the paper off his door. Another fake violation notice, this time claiming his house was now unfit for the neighborhood. You seriously just walked onto my property again? He said, stepping closer. Karen straightened, trying to regain her smug composure. I have every right to. No, Nathan cut in, holding up his phone. You don't. He pressed play on his security footage. The video showed Karen sneaking onto his porch, the second time this week. Her face went pale. You can't record. It's my property, Karen. Nathan's voice was calm, deadly. And you just committed criminal trespassing. Karen froze. Then, flashing lights. A police cruiser rolled up, stopping right in front of them. Nathan grinned. Oh, by the way, I already reported you. Karen spun as two officers stepped out. Ma'am, we received a report about unauthorized trespassing. Karen's face fell apart. This is just a misunderstanding. Nathan folded his arms. Sure it is. Let's check the footage, shall we? He held up his phone, replaying the video for the officers. Karen's eyes darted around, panicked. I was just leaving a notice. One of the officers nodded. Ma'am, that's not how notices work. You've been warned before about harassment. Karen swallowed hard. You can't arrest me. The officer held up a citation. We're issuing a criminal trespassing warning. If you step onto Mr. Carter's property again, we'll have grounds to arrest you. Karen was shaking now. Sign here, the officer said, handing her the ticket. Karen's hands trembled as she scribbled her signature. Nathan smirked. Checkmate. As the officers drove off, Karen whirled on him. This isn't over, she spat. Nathan crossed his arms. Oh, I think it is. She stormed off, her power finally slipping through her fingers. But the real blow? It was coming. Because now, the HOA itself was about to collapse. HOA crumbles and Karen's downfall. Karen had officially lost her power, but Nathan wasn't done yet. He didn't just want her out. He wanted to destroy the corrupt HOA she had built. And he had the perfect plan. The final HOA meeting was held 2 days later. This time, the entire neighborhood showed up. People who had been fined unfairly. Homeowners who had mysteriously donated money to avoid violations. Neighbors who had been harassed by Karen for years. And they were angry. Nathan stood in front of the crowd, arms crossed, waiting. Karen entered the room, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. She knew she was losing control, but she wasn't giving up yet. She took her seat at the head of the table and cleared her throat. "This meeting is called to order." "No," one of the board members interrupted. Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" The board member stood. "Before we continue, I'd like to bring forward a motion to dissolve the HOA." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous. The HOA is necessary for community order." Another board member stood. "We've reviewed the financials, Karen, and after consulting with legal counsel, we've determined that the HOA has been operating illegally for years." Karen's hands clenched into fists. Nathan stepped forward. "You're done, Karen." Karen shook her head, panicking. "No, you can't do this. The HOA is legally binding." The board member held up a signed petition. Over 80% of homeowners have voted to dissolve the HOA. Effective immediately. The room erupted in cheers. Karen stood abruptly. You can't. You're ruining everything. You need me." Nathan grinned. "Karen, the only thing we need is for you to pack up and leave." Karen trembled with rage, her world crumbling around her. She opened her mouth to argue. But nobody cared. She had lost. And Nathan, he had won. Karen's personal downfall. The next day, a real estate sign appeared in front of Karen's house. "For sale, price reduced." Nathan chuckled as he sipped his morning coffee on his porch. Word had spread fast. After losing her power, Karen had no choice but to sell her home and move. She had been fined into oblivion for her illegal HOA practices. And now, she was leaving town. Nathan watched as she loaded the last of her belongings into a U-Haul, her once proud expression replaced with bitter defeat. As she climbed into the driver's seat, she glanced toward Nathan's house. Nathan raised his coffee mug in a silent goodbye. Karen scowled and sped off, her reign of terror officially over. That night, the neighborhood celebrated. Someone made T-shirts that said "Free from the HOA." A neighbor put up a sign that read, "Welcome to the Karen-free zone." And Nathan, he enjoyed every second of it. Because now, the neighborhood was finally his. The HOA faces full legal consequences. Karen might have been gone, but Nathan wasn't done yet. She had run the HOA like a corrupt empire. And now, that empire was about to face real legal consequences. A week after the HOA was officially dissolved, the city launched a full-scale investigation. Nathan had made sure of it. With the help of a few former HOA board members, he turned over every piece of evidence. Heavy checkmark, Karen's fraudulent financial records. Heavy checkmark, the selective enforcement of fines. Heavy checkmark, the bribes disguised as donations. And the best part? The city took it seriously. Karen and her hand-picked enforcers were hit with thousands of dollars in fines for mismanaging HOA funds. And since some homeowners had been unfairly fined for years, the city ruled that they were entitled to refunds. Nathan smirked when he got a check in the mail for every fake fine he had paid over the last year. Not that he needed the money, but the symbolism? That was priceless. Meanwhile, some of the remaining HOA board members weren't so lucky. 2 of them had been in on Karen's financial scheme, and when the legal pressure hit, they turned on her immediately. One of them even testified that Karen had forced them to approve fines under the table. The fallout was glorious. Karen, who had once patrolled the neighborhood like a queen, was now publicly humiliated. And as for Nathan, he wasn't just a homeowner anymore. He was the guy who had saved the neighborhood. The final cherry on top? One of the last official actions of the dissolved HOA was sending a cease and desist order to Karen for trying to fine people even after being removed. She had sent out one last desperate notice to a few neighbors, pretending the HOA still had authority. The legal response? Karen Wellington is no longer affiliated with the HOA, which has been formally dissolved. Any further attempts to enforce rules will result in legal action. Karen never sent another letter again. Karen's personal downfall. Karen had lost everything. Her position, power, reputation, all gone. The HOA she had ruled with an iron fist was dissolved. Her illegal schemes had been exposed. Her financial empire had crumbled. And now, she was just another disgraced former HOA president, one that nobody wanted in their neighborhood. Nathan figured that was the end of it, until he heard the rumors. Apparently, Karen had tried to move into another HOA-controlled neighborhood. But when the new HOA board found out about her history, they denied her application. Word had spread fast. Karen was blacklisted from every HOA she had once idolized. Nathan laughed when he heard the news. Poetic justice. But the best part came weeks later. One of Nathan's neighbors ran into Karen at City Hall. She was there, arguing with a city clerk, trying to appeal her fines and clear her name. The clerk didn't care. Apparently, she had been at it for hours, demanding that her unfair treatment be reviewed. Nathan's neighbor recorded part of the meltdown and sent it to him. The video showed Karen leaning over the counter, red-faced, gesturing wildly. "You don't understand. I was upholding order. These people are ruining the community." The clerk didn't even look up. "Ma'am, your case has been reviewed. The decision is final." Karen slammed a hand on the desk. "But I was the president." The clerk sighed, rubbing her temples. "And now, you're just another resident." Nathan rewatched the clip twice, shaking his head. The mighty HOA queen had become just another Karen yelling at a government worker. Fitting. Nathan figured she'd eventually fade into irrelevance. She had no more power, no more control, no more neighborhood to terrorize. And as far as he was concerned, that was the best revenge of all. Months passed, and the neighborhood thrived. Without the HOA, people relaxed. Driveways had classic cars and work trucks parked freely. Lawns weren't measured down to the inch. Families put up decorations without fear of fines. It was peaceful. And every now and then, someone would bring up Karen. Usually as a joke. One afternoon, as Nathan sipped coffee on his porch, his neighbor Mark walked up with a grin. He held up a printed notice, dramatically clearing his throat. "Dear Mr. Carter, this is an official violation notice. Your truck is too awesome and makes mine look bad. Fine, 1 case of beer." Nathan snorted, shaking his head. "Well, Mark," he said, stretching. "Rules are rules." They both laughed, knowing one thing for certain. The only rule in the neighborhood now? No more Karens.